Welcome to the Fibromyalgia Podcast. I'm your coach, Tami Stackelhouse, and this is episode 125. In today's episode, I talk with attorney Meredith Holley about how to handle harassment and discrimination while holding your boundaries in a respectful way and speaking up for your needs. As a communication coach and conflict mediator, Meredith helps resolve toxic workplace conflict so that courageous professionals can feel empowered and supported in work that makes a difference. But toxic conflicts can be made up of many things and happen many places. While Meredith does focus a lot of her work on sexual harassment, it is just one example. You could also be facing discrimination based on gender, race, physical abilities, your health, your age, or any number of things. These conflicts could happen to you at work, or, as Meredith and I discussed today, it could even be happening in your doctor's office. Let me introduce you to today's guest. Meredith Holley is a workplace conflict mediator, a communication coach, attorney, and the founder of Eris Conflict Resolution. Meredith co-hosts the Empowered Communication Podcast, where she shares insight and communication structures that she has seen resolve toxic workplace conflict. Meredith is the author of the best-selling books Career Defense 101, How to Stop Sexual Harassment Without Quitting Your Job, and The Inclusive Leader's Guide to Healthy Workplace Culture. We'll have links to Meredith's podcast and her books in today's show notes at fibromyalgiapodcast.com/125. As always, the information included in this podcast is not meant to be considered medical or legal advice, nor is it intended to replace consulting with a qualified physician or your attorney. Please be sure and stay tuned after the interview. I've got our listener shout out for you and information on our next Fibromyalgia Stories of Hope and Healing event, which will be held live on Saturday, January 20th. Now, here's my interview with Meredith. Hi, Meredith. Welcome to the podcast. I'm so excited to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited.
So one of the first things I always like to start with, just so the people listening know who you are, how did you get into this? Of course, I've just read your bio, but how did you get into doing this particular kind of work? It's pretty specialized, yeah?
Yeah. So early in my legal career, I got my dream job as a civil rights lawyer, and I was representing women in sexual harassment lawsuits, and my boss was sexually harassing me at the same time.
Oh, good Lord.
And yeah. And so it was this very embarrassing problem for me to have. I felt like I should be the person who has the answers to all these problems, and I was experiencing the problem myself and I didn't know how to solve it. And so I went to other lawyers and I described what was happening. I said, I know how to file a lawsuit if somebody is fired for an illegal reason. How do we teach people how to just get someone to not touch them every day? Like if they just don't want to be touched every day, how do we make that happen? And basically other lawyers told me, we don't know how to do that. Like you should probably quit. It sounds really bad. Or if you get fired, you could file a lawsuit, but we don't know how to get somebody to stop touching you. And I thought, okay, like the human brain has invented the iPhone. There has got to be a way to have someone not touch you every day. Like
that just seems pretty basic, right?
Has to be possible, right?
Yeah.
And I also even reflected on these times, like it was not, I was in my 30s. It wasn't the first time I had anyone harass me before, but in these other situations, I really had been able to encounter them from a pretty empowered perspective. Like I did Peace Corps in Ukraine. There was this guy that followed me home from a party this one time and I just kicked him off of me. Like I'm not like a wilting flower,
But you can't kick your boss, right?
That's the thing. He was my boss and he did have a lot of power over me. He had power over my job. And for me, it wasn't a situation where I felt like, oh, I could just quit this job and find another job. Like I wasn't working at McDonald's and then I could go work at Burger King. There was not another comparable job. And I also had women coming to me who were in similar situations. You know, they were in a job that they loved. It was their career. They can't just go from this job to another job, and quitting. I mean, quitting always has an impact on people. You know, you lose seniority. You've learned how systems work in a certain business. You have to relearn. You have to relearn a new culture when you go to a new job. There are just always these impacts. And I was trained to say in my job, well, call us back when you get fired. The same thing that I was hearing, you know? And so it took me over a year to find tools that worked. But once I did, I was able to occupy that space in a completely different way. And it ended up that my harasser apologized and stopped touching me. And but I was in that environment in such a more empowered way that even if and when he did touch me again, I was in a space where I could kick him off. Does that make sense? Like my dynamic in the workplace really just changed so much that I felt confident in that space to stop behavior that I felt was unacceptable and to make it more of an impact instead of to be impacted myself. I started working with clients with the tools that I had learned, mostly to help them prepare for testimony, because I was still really in the litigation space at that point. And I saw people who had experienced severe trauma really able to testify more clearly and more accurately as to what they experienced. A lot of times what you see with people who have experienced pretty severe trauma is you ask them a question and they answer a different question because their narrative in their mind is so strong and their fears around the situation is so strong that they're not answering the question that they were actually asked. And so what I learned with the tools that really were empowering to me in the workplace, also I saw help other people be able to testify clearly when they're asked questions in the legal system. And then I had, in this 1 year, I had 4 people tell me that the work that we had done saved their lives and that they had been suicidal, and they hadn't told me about it when we were working together, but that it really helped them resolve suicidal ideation. And I thought, man, like this just changed my life so much. And I don't want to keep telling people who are in a toxic work environment, oh, just call me back when you get fired and we'll file a lawsuit, because no one wants that. No, employees don't want to sue their company and companies don't want to get sued. Like no one wants litigation, even though it sounds so noble to have civil rights litigation, and it is so noble, it is also so stressful and so damaging to basically everybody involved. So if we can go into these spaces where there is some kind of toxic work environment happening, and we can help resolve that while people keep their jobs, while people just contribute to creating a healthy workplace culture, that really is the outcome that everyone wants.
Oh my gosh, I had so many thoughts while you were talking. And for you listening, you might be wondering, we're talking about sexual harassment and how that relates to fibromyalgia, but I think you can substitute in there discrimination based on your health or your physical abilities or any of those kinds of things as well. It's the same environment, maybe just manifesting in a different way, right?
Well, and also I would say, you know, when somebody is vulnerable because of their health, there a lot of times is harassment as an overlapping experience with also the challenges that you face because of health issues, because of fibromyalgia. I have had a number of clients who have had fibromyalgia or other sort of invisible disabilities that require them to engage with their employer in a pretty vulnerable way, talking about their medical process and their body's symptoms. And I think that if you're being harassed because of disability, like targeted based on disability, if you're being targeted based on work product, if you're being targeted based on sex or race or sexual orientation or religion, any of these issues, gender identity, like it just is such an energy drain. And so if you have if you have something like fibromyalgia, if you have particularly an invisible disability that really takes a toll on your energy and you're experiencing workplace conflict on top of it, one, that's very common. And so I hope anyone experiencing that doesn't feel alone or like they've done something wrong to deserve that. And two, I think it is like there are just these steps that we can take to ease that energy drain wherever it's coming from.
And another side of that as well is all that extra stress that you're experiencing is going to make your symptoms worse.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. And there's such a relationship between it because your symptoms get worse, you feel more vulnerable, then the impacts of the work environment have a bigger stress on you, then you feel more unhealthy, then the work, like there's such a spiral to the bottom when there is a relationship between physical health, mental health, and work environment.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And some of these things are not big things that happen. Before we started recording, you and I were just kind of throwing around some of the everyday little things, like even just the comment of, but you don't look sick.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
And then somebody says it to you one day, and then somebody else says it to you the next day, and then somebody else says it to you the third day. And they don't all realize that you're getting this pushback about whether you're really sick or not over and over and over again, but it all piles on and creates that energy drain. Or somebody says, like I was giving the example, like, oh, well, Julie got so much work done last week, and then looked at you like, you shouldn't have been sick last week. You shouldn't have taken care of your body. Or even there's a comment that people say that is such a backhanded, like compliment. It's the one that's like, I really should take care of my body as much as you take care of yours. Do you know what I mean?
Right. Or I wish I could just stay home.
Right.
I wish I could call in sick.
Right.
I don't think it works like that.
Right. Nobody wishes that they could call in sick. It's not real. Yeah. Yeah. But this idea that invisible disabilities are not a real experience, that you're not actually, that you're just being lazy.
Right.
So not true.
And sometimes that discrimination is overt as well, right?
Yes.
Like I was telling you, one of my Facebook friends got harassed when she used her handicap parking tag to park in, the space she is allowed to park in, and then actually followed through the store and harassed. I mean,
Right.
these things really do happen. So how do we become more empowered to handle those things when they come up?
So what I see as what I use a system that I called empowered communication. And so I basically look to 3 pillars, which I believe are the pillars of empowered communication. And the first pillar is boundaries. And boundaries require us to understand what is ours and what is not ours, and to be willing to plan on other people being inappropriate with us, making inappropriate comments, even harassing us, violating our boundaries, and then us taking action to enforce our safe space. So what happens a lot of times when people experience even those daily aggressions, I don't call them microaggressions because I think they're just aggressions, but like the you don't look sick kind of aggression. Like to me, that is a boundary violation, because I think that a very common boundary people have is not tolerate people describing us. Like it's nobody's business to describe you, what you look like and what you don't look like. Like it's just I don't tolerate people describing me boundary. And then enforcing that boundary can look like walking away. It can look like whatever it takes to keep you safe and then reward you in the moment. Instead of our enforcing the boundaries, a lot of times though, what we do is we absorb the comment that the person is given, and we question whether it's true or not true, and we debate it in our minds, and we find evidence that maybe we don't look sick, maybe we're not really sick, maybe we are just lazy, but wait, we know that's not true, we are sick, and then we just debate it back and forth, and that creates this energy drain. Instead, what we can do is we can say, oh, I have a boundary of people not describing me. I'm going to enforce that boundary right now. I'm going to walk away, or I'm going to tell them your description of me is not welcome right now. I don't tolerate people describing me. You owe me $5. You owe me a coffee for describing me, whatever that is. Right. And then the second pillar of empowered communication is reprogramming hegemony. And so hegemony is the dominance of one group over another group. So in this situation, it would be able-bodied dominance over the group of people who has health conditions, whatever those look like, right? So because we are so steeped in culture, most of us have absorbed some kind of able-bodied dominant thinking. And we want to unpack that and say, what is in my brain that might say to me, you're not allowed to take a sick day. Your health condition's not real. You need to work until you're too tired. You should cover up your health condition. It's embarrassing that you have it. Whatever those narratives are that we all absorb, that we then say to ourselves. Mm-hmm. How do we unpack those and reprogram them to say, actually, health conditions have been a major creative space for culture always. Health conditions are why we have elevators. Health conditions are why we have email. Like, these are spaces of enormous gift and creativity to the world. How do we give that gift to ourselves and reprogram what we've been trained to believe to really serve ourselves and serve what we want the world to look like? And then the third pillar is accountability. And that comes back again to what is mine and what is other people's. So if I take certain actions, I get certain results. If I don't take certain action, I might get different results. And we want to test those out and neutralize them rather than taking on ourselves the responsibility of other people who are maybe predators or harassers. I know that's kind of a lot to unpack, but that's sort of the basic system that I use, that I've seen. And I did also want to say, I had this one client who wouldn't mind me sharing this, but she had an invisible disability. It wasn't fibromyalgia, but it did really impact her in the workplace. And she was an HR person, and she had a boss who was sexually harassing her. And it got so bad that at one point she completely collapsed, and they had to call an ambulance to come get her. She was restricted from driving after that. Her heart rate spiked to like 200 or something in this incident. And one of the things that had happened with her was she kind of minimized the impact that his harassment was having on her. And I think that can be, and I think we tend to minimize, like, it's not that big of a deal that they ask me or that they tell me I don't look sick every day. I just need to get over it. I just need to be cool. This is my problem. It's not anybody else's problem. I should get over it. It's not that bad. And that minimization has such an enormous additional health impact, I think. And so whether harassment that we're experiencing is a quote unquote microaggression, whether it's targeted at our gender and not our disability, whether it's whatever it is, like, I think that especially any kind of invisible disability that we have, invites us to really check in with our bodies, trust our instincts, listen to ourselves, and not minimize the external impacts that are happening to us.
Because all the little things, little in quotes,
yeah,
those are actually the big things, right? Like, sometimes those are the harder ones to shake off and have not affect you, because sometimes the big things are just so ridiculous. It's easy to stick that on, clearly that's actually about them and not about me at all, right? Because it's just so ridiculous.
Right. But then the quote unquote little ones, but I mean, why have we even labeled them as little ones? That's all a cultural thing, right?
Yeah.
We've labeled them as little because of the values that we've been taught to have that say able-bodiedness is better, right?
Right. Ableism.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
so interesting. As you were talking through your three pillars, there were a few things that in practice might seem a bit contradictory,
Yeah.
right? Like acknowledging the weight of those quote unquote little things, but also having the boundary of what's yours and what's mine, right?
Right.
So, yeah, you said that, but took the meaning of that, right? Like my interpretation, right?
Sure.
There's it's sort of a both and, not an either or.
Sure. I think it's true. I mean, I think that, this is a space where I kind of see coaching get a little bit abused, and the concepts around coaching, I think, get a little bit abused, probably intentionally sometimes and not intentionally other times. But I think that when we've been taught to internalize blame and internalize responsibility for other people's actions, we a lot of times, when we start to realize that our thoughts create our feelings and how powerful our thinking is and how powerful our interpretation is, we then kind of can turn that against ourselves in some ways. And so for example, somebody else says, "You don't look sick." That statement is theirs. It's on them. And we know that. But then what do we do with knowing that it's on them? Sometimes we're like, "Oh, don't worry about it. That's on them. Oh, don't think about it. That's on them." But
Don't
if
let
we
it
are,
bother you. Yeah.
yeah, don't let it bother you. And that's okay to do. We can do that. And sometimes that's effective. But if we are like, "Don't bother us," but it does bother us, we're also allowed to have that process. You don't have to pretend positivity onto a sharp environment. I guess I think, sometimes I describe toxic work environments like you got a job. You got a job and you think you got a job at the pet store petting kittens. You go to work every day, you're so excited to pet the kittens. You just love petting kittens, and you go home and you're like, "Why do I have all these like slashes? I keep having to bandage myself up every day." But like, I know I love petting kittens, and like it's probably fine, right? Like it's okay. And you keep going back, and then finally you have to acknowledge you didn't get a job petting kittens. You got a job cleaning a tiger cage. And like there's certain equipment you need to wear to clean a tiger cage, and pretending that a tiger is a kitten in a positive way to make the work environment sound better doesn't protect you from slashes. And I think from like a tiger attack,
Mm-hmm.
and tigers are just tigers. It doesn't make them evil or bad that they have longer claws than kittens, but they are bigger than kittens. And I think in that way also, there's this Buddhist quote that basically says the world is sharp, and we can try to cover the world in leather to make sure everything is safe and to make sure we're not cut all the time, or we can wear shoes. And the idea of managing our thinking is the idea of wearing shoes and saying, "I'm going to manage me and my space." But what we do a lot of times in the pretending things are positive is we say, "I'm not going to wear shoes. I'm just going to walk on this sharp world barefoot and pretend that I'm wearing shoes, pretend that it's soft, But the world doesn't have to be soft for us to protect ourselves. Does that make sense as an analogy?
Oh, I totally get that. Yeah, very much, very much. It's kind of like with our symptoms,
Right.
pretending that they're not as bad as they are, right?
Right.
As you were talking, I was thinking of one day my husband looking at me and saying, "I think your headaches are worse than you think they are."
Right.
That we
Right.
just like we've gotten used to, whether it's an environment that we're in and how people are treating us or how our body feels, we get used to a certain, like, our normal, which may or may not be healthy or desirable.
So true. I got diagnosed with severe sleep apnea earlier this year. And my oxygen levels went down to 66% in
Holy
my
crap.
sleep test, which is like, they were pretty worried I was going to die. Like I was dying at night, and
Yeah.
I had like cortisol spikes in the evening that I saw like a functional medicine doctor. We did all these tests and she was like, "Oh, you have these mysterious cortisol spikes." And then when I got the sleep apnea result, I was like, "Oh, because I'm dying at night and my body's like a
That's
little worried to
exactly.
go to sleep." But I had that slow decline of health where I was like really sick at the point I got diagnosed, but I couldn't tell if I was really sick. Like I was sort of like,
Right.
maybe this is just how life is.
I'm getting old, right?
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe I'm not eating healthy enough. I feel like I'm eating healthy enough. Like maybe I should get out and take a walk more. But I think emotionally it can be the same thing where you just get used to a certain level of treatment from people, right? People talk to you in a certain way and you're like, "Yeah, it's about them. So maybe they just get to talk to me that way." And we get to do that, right? We all get to set what our boundaries are. But ultimately, if we're chronically experiencing emotional symptoms, health symptoms, whatever it is, it's something to pay attention to and something that we can take action around and can honor ourselves around.
Hmm. Right, right.
Yeah.
Oh, this is so difficult and so I don't even have the words for what I'm thinking right now. It's like it's just such a complicated mess, right? And it's not something that we can totally just remove ourselves from, especially with an invisible disability, right? Because we
Right.
carry that with us.
Right.
And that might be a little bit different than, work environment stress and where you get to go home. I carry my body with me.
Right.
And so that could happen anytime, any place.
I mean, I also think even just like you and I'm conscious that you and I are talking, and I've used the word disability a few times, and you and I are talking pretty casually about like like I was sexually harassed and people have disabilities, but even just those labels can feel so triggering to people. Like the word disability, the acknowledgement that what I experienced was sexual harassment, like
Right. Yeah.
feels like labeling ourselves as weak or victims or the problem, like that we're like there's something wrong with us. And I think that there is an emotional level of carrying the labels with you, carrying the experience and what it means about you emotionally, that is kind of similar to carrying physical symptoms with you away from the workplace. Because a lot of people who I talk to, who honestly, a lot of people who are navigating how to ask for accommodations, especially around invisible disability issue, can have a similar experience to people who are being sexually harassed, where emotionally you take that home with you, like
Mm-hmm.
physically how you take a disability home with you, right? And it feels like it haunts you and it's hard to let go of and stop thinking about, right? Like we can say stop thinking about it pretty easily, but our brains are still like, alert, alert. You should probably think about this more, which can be its own physical symptom, I think.
Right, right.
Uh,
Dwelling on it, replaying conversations,
yeah.
situations, all of that. Yeah.
Yeah. And then to me, the point isn't like with physical symptoms, the point isn't to not carry it with you. Like we have this gift of our bodies, whatever they are in this life, we and it is our duty to take care of them. Like they're like the first animal, I always think, that we get that we can take care of. And if we had a puppy, we wouldn't be like, oh, this puppy still needs to be fed, but we are kind of like that with ourselves sometimes, with our bodies. And
Mm-hmm.
I think like, you know there is, like we've talked about, like there is this creativity that comes with any health symptoms, like, you know, email was invented because people couldn't talk on the phone because of deafness. Elevators were invented to help people in wheelchairs. You know who benefits from those? Everybody. Like, they are these ultimately gifts that don't feel like gifts, admittedly. And I think that harassment can be a similar thing. And I think there's something that is like, that digs us out, like digs out and purges all of what we think about ourselves, all of what we expect from life in these experiences. It really asks, how can we expand to our biggest self? How can we be who we're truly meant to be? And then there also is the option of choosing to limit ourselves more around it, right? Like, you kind of get to a crisis point with either of them, where you can either embrace yourself or you can limit yourself.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. One of the things I talk about a lot is, living in the body that you have right now today, right?
Yeah.
Not the body that you wish you had, or that you used to have, or that you think you should have,
Right.
but the one that you really have,
Right.
and what those limitations may or may not be right now, not taking on things that aren't here yet, or, trying to act like, we did 20 years ago or whatever.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, and the same, I always think, so I'm with my little dog, and she's a delight, but she does not care for like a half-mile walk. She is not down for it. And she will tell you at about a quarter of a mile that she is ready to go home, and she will very much protest if you try. She will make you drag her. And I think that sometimes our bodies are the same. They're like, this is not okay. Do not sit here, go take care of yourself. And what I see a lot of times is, when we, like, this is very common in what I see when people are in toxic work environments, we minimize it and stuff it down and stuff it down. And then when we leave, a lot of times is when people have the biggest panic attacks, like the biggest emotional situations, the biggest health issues come up when you're finally safe, because you didn't realize that your body's been shouting at you for ages, and it is in total panic. And you have to just let that process happen. You have to just like be present with the body, like you said, that does exist. I have to go on the walk with my dog that does exist, not the husky that might go 2 miles with me, like
Right.
she's done when she's done. And it's the same with our bodies. Like, they are gonna get louder until you listen.
Mm-hmm. Yep, definitely.
Yeah.
So what do we do with this information then? We've been kind of talking in a more theoretical way here about things, but when the rubber meets the road, what happens what should we even do when somebody makes a comment like that, or we find ourselves in a situation like that?
To me, the first step is really noticing and acknowledging it. Sometimes people aren't ready to have like a hilarious quip, or like take action, or like, I have all kinds of funny boundary enforcement ideas that I think are hilarious. But like, we were talking before we were recording, and you were like, oh, I'd like to have a snappy quip to somebody harassing me, but I'm not going to do it because I'm too nice, And
I've
I
got some
think,
good ones that I would never actually say.
right. And I think that's fine. I don't think that we have to prove something. I think I think, so I use sort of 3 steps for bystander intervention, and they are, respect, refocus, and report. And I think we can do the same things with ourselves. Like, how do we center respect for the person who's being targeted in that moment, even if it's ourselves? Mm-hmm. How do we even internally center respect for ourselves? And I think when we have an expectation that we have a funny quip, or that we take a lot of action when someone else is having bad behavior, we're really putting that responsibility of their actions back on ourselves, right? So how do you center respect for yourself? How do you separate from that other person's bad actions to refocus yourself on what you deserve. So it's I'll tell you the funny ones that I think are funny. Like, I really think we don't have in the United States, we don't have street harassment fines, even though I think we should. But they do in some other countries where, like, if you harass somebody on the street, you could get a ticket. But I think instead, like, what we should do is we should ask people for their Venmo handles and just send them $100 Venmo request, because they don't even have to pay it, but it would be kind of funny, I think
this is what you owe me for that comment you made.
Yes, exactly. Yes.
I like that.
What's your Venmo handle, bro?
I got something I need to send you. A request for
a fine for harassing me. So there are funny things like that, but I think the point is that we always know the right thing. Like, what is the thing that creates respect for you right now? Sometimes it's just saying, no, thank you. Or, that was an inside comment. Like, there were a bunch of, there's this list that I saw of funny things to say to your relatives who are being inappropriate over the holidays. And one of them was, what gives you the confidence to say something like that? There are all kinds of funny quips that we can say. And some of us aren't going to say those, right? It doesn't feel authentic to who we are. It doesn't feel true to who we are. And the main point is center respect for yourself. How do you refocus yourself on rewarding yourself in a way that you deserve and you want, and that's authentic to you? How do you refocus on safety for you, not making the other person safe necessarily, because they may never be safe, but making your environment safe, even if it's not sharing that environment with this unsafe person? That doesn't even necessarily mean quitting a job. Sometimes it means taking a walk around the block while the other person is engaging in inappropriate behavior. Sometimes it means going into a room and locking the door while the other person is engaging in their inappropriate behavior. And then we can report, and reporting can be complicated. So, for example, some harassment is a crime. Some discrimination at work is a crime. Some, like, anything that is physically violent to you may be a crime. You can report to the police. You can call 911 if someone is being physically violent. For some people, though, that's complicated because 911 is also not safe for them, right? For a lot of people of color, 911 is not a safe option. So then you want to know, what is my 911? Who are my 911 supports? Who are my people who are with me no matter what, who will tell me what's safe for me right now, right? So reporting as a third option like, HR is not always a safe option, but sometimes HR is a tool that you can use for reporting to enlist someone else in helping you be safe. So I always think respect, refocus, report. Like, that's what I think of in that moment. And that really is individualized to different people. So when I work with somebody in this situation, we do brainstorm, what are my boundaries? What are the behaviors that I do not tolerate in my environment? When I plan on those behaviors happening, what do I do to enforce that?
I love that. And those kinds of things you can't decide well in the moment when things are happening. So you've got to do it when later. You feel safe, when you feel comfortable, and you can think clearly.
Exactly. In the moment, you just listen to your body, listen to your body, listen to your body, listen to your body, because your body's going to tell you what to do. Like, if you've trained yourself not to listen to your body, just ask that question. What do I need right now? What is my body telling me right now? Just get curious about it. For some people, it doesn't feel safe to listen to their bodies, and I totally get that. But what's one thing you can do to take care of your body? Or one way to bridge that gap is, what would I do for a friend I love right now? What would I do for a child if I saw this child in this situation? And just imagine it being somebody else. because we a lot of times have a harder time imagining what we do for ourselves, which
Right, exactly. We're at the bottom of the list, right?
yes, yes. But we know what we would do for a friend or a kid or what they
Absolutely. Somebody that we love and that we're responsible for taking
yeah.
care of, right?
Yeah. And
Mm-hmm.
then imagine that being you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. You
Yeah.
know, one of the things that occurs to me as we're having this conversation too is we're talking a lot about work or, random people in the parking lot when you use your handicap tag or whatever. But this could also happen in a doctor's office.
And it
And I
does.
bet as you're listening right now, you're probably thinking of a situation that happened to you with a doctor. And that's one of the reasons why I really like your, respect. What is it? Respect,
Refocus and
refocus,
report.
and
Yeah.
report. Because you can do that same thing with just like you could do with your boss, right? A doctor is, somebody who's an authority figure, maybe in a position of power over us in a way. And that's you're not going to make some sarcastic, snippy comment back to your doctor when they can,
I mean, some people do. I respect it when they do.
But you have to know the risks of that too, right?
Right.
That could affect your medical record, which then could
Right.
affect care that you get later, diagnosis that you get or don't get. Unfortunately.
It's true. It can. I mean, and at the same time, so one of the processes I had to go through when I was experiencing sexual harassment is my brain just offered me the thought, what if you get fired? What if you get fired? What if you get fired? And some of that is true in a medical situation too. What if he diagnoses me with borderline personality disorder? What if
He drops me as a patient
he drops me as a
or
patient?
yeah.
Yeah. What if he says I'm combative and the specialist won't see me? What if he won't prescribe needed medication? Right. And I'm saying which is like gendered, but I unfortunately a lot of times see this issue being gendered.
Yes.
It's not universal. Like people of all genders can be discriminatory, but there is a larger incident on one side of, if you think of gender as a binary, one side of the binary.
We do see it more with the old male doctors.
Yeah.
It was I mean, to be fair, medicine was different when they were going through their training than the people who are trained now. Like literally what was taught to them about pain and, patient care and all of that was very different, and many of them are a product of their upbringing, so to speak.
That's true. You also do see good doctors who are older white men.
Yeah.
So I don't ever want to use that as an excuse. I do think sometimes people just need to try a little harder to understand other people's perspective. But now I've lost the train of what you were asking about. We've gone down the
No. Absolutely. No, I was just talking about the fact that, we were talking about how you have to think about, what if this happens?
Yeah.
And I'm assuming you're going to go somewhere into preparing for that what if scenario and thinking through it at least.
Yeah. So my brain offered me a lot of what if you get fired? What if they fire you if you do this? And then the same can be true with doctors. What if he drops me? All of these what ifs. So I had to come to a place where I said, my safety is more important than if I get fired or not. If I get fired because I was advocating for my safety or client safety, if I get fired because I was identifying sexism in a way to protect other people and myself, I'm willing to allow that to happen. My safety is important enough for that. I think the same can be true with doctors and actually can be important with doctors. I had a bunch of experiences this year of pretty significant scheduling errors and even medical documentation errors in all these health situations that I've had. And really the takeaway lesson for me was I needed to take my health seriously and correct issues that needed to be corrected. That didn't mean that I had to yell at anybody. It didn't mean that I had to be disrespectful to anybody. It didn't mean that I had to act outside of what felt true and authentic to me. But I did, for example, end up submitting a complaint to both my primary care doctor and the hospital about some of the issues that I experienced that were, to me, beyond mistakes. And I felt good about the way I did it. I felt in integrity about the way I did it. And I did make it clear in those that I just was concerned that a surgery that I had scheduled would be smooth. And I was not like asking for anything else. I just wanted to red flag that things had not been smooth. And I want to do whatever I can to make sure they're paying attention that this be smooth for me. And I think that that's always fair to do. Like you don't get things that you don't ask for. And there is an action component where our bodies deserve our loyalty. They deserve our advocacy, like we would advocate for a child or our best friend, like taking action, being clear about what we expect does not have to be disrespect.
Right. And asking for what you need is not disrespectful either. I mean, it's in a way it's disrespectful to yourself to not ask for what you need, right?
Exactly. And I think that, there are people, and many of them are doctors, who have very busy lives and do need you to communicate in a way that says, this is the pain I'm having. This is where it's located. This is the action that I need you to take. That doesn't have to be combative or anything. It just is what you need.
Mm-hmm. And the thing that really just stuck out to me just then, as you said all of that, is the clarity of it, right? Like it's really easy for someone who is in a lot of pain, a lot of brain fog, really fatigued, to just go to the doctor and be like, fix me. I need help. And that doesn't give them enough information to be able to actually help you.
And the other thing I see people do with doctors, because I actually used to do medical malpractice cases, and I did personal injury law. And so I engaged with a lot of medical records and a lot of doctors as experts. And the other thing I see people do that is not helpful in the medical system is they go and say, I have this diagnosis and I've looked it up online and I need you to prescribe me this and that. Doctors become very resistant to that, because ultimately what doctors want is they want you to report symptoms, and they want you to report the location of the symptoms, and you can report all day long symptom. Like doctors, in my experience, never get upset if you report like 17,000 symptoms. Like they are there to listen to that. If you tell a doctor that you pre-decided a diagnosis that you have, doctors are very resistant to it. And that's when they start to say like, oh, this person is combative, or to like, they resist the diagnosis that you think you have. And it's because that's their expertise, is to give you the diagnosis and to give you the treatment options. But it is, they want to hear symptoms all day long.
Mm-hmm. Because those are like the puzzle pieces, right, that we're putting together to see the whole picture. But if you just give them a handful of puzzle pieces and tell them what the picture's supposed to be, there's all this question out here of all these things that we don't see the whole picture. So how do we really know?
Right.
Same thing with like deciding what treatment options you want. It's a much different thing to go to the doctor and say, I read about this. What do you think? How would this help me? Than to go in and say, I need you to prescribe XYZ.
And the same thing is true, I think, with requesting accommodation at work. A lot of times where I see people get into trouble with requesting accommodation at work is that somebody decides an accommodation that's the one accommodation they think they need, and they get really stuck on it, when really I see it be more effective if you can go to your doctor and say, here are my symptoms. What do you think are my best accommodations? suggest a range to the employer, maybe even talk to other support people, massage therapists, acupuncturists, whoever are your supports, about what they see being successful accommodations. Use it as a real brainstorm of what is possible. And it's that like stuckness on one outcome that sometimes can create a lot of dissonance. But then I think what a lot of times happens is there becomes a conflict around the one outcome issue, and the employer says no to the outcome. The person asking for the accommodation gets really stuck on it. And then it turns into a conflict there, when really there could be other options to be successful in the workplace. You are a valued, great employee. It starts to feel personal because people have said no about it, and then you give up. And the lesson isn't to give up. The lesson is, what are other actions that we can take to get towards the ultimate outcome of being successful, caring for your body,
Mm-hmm. It reminds me a lot of just like life with a chronic illness anyway. When we decide that life should look a certain way and aren't open to all the many possibilities. I never thought I would be here doing this.
Right?
But it's amazing, and so we've got to be open to all the possibilities. I think it's so much more valuable to think about, what do I want to feel like, than to think about, what do I want my life to look like?
Yeah.
Right? Because you can get to those feelings from lots of different ways.
And sometimes it's like, when you're thinking about going to see a doctor, what do I want the ultimate outcome to be? The ultimate outcome is like, I want my body to be as healthy as possible, right? Not, I want a particular diagnosis because I'm attached to it. In the workplace, what do I want the ultimate outcome to be? I want to be able to share my gifts with the world. I want to be able to be productive in my life, right? Not, I need to have this certain desk or certain chair or certain days off in the week, or I need it to be remote work. Although those may all be components of showing up and being successful and thriving.
Right. That's like going to the doctor and thinking, I need them to prescribe me this medication, when maybe what you're really thinking is, I just need to figure out how to have a good night's sleep.
Right.
Right. And maybe you need a CPAP machine.
Which, go get one, my friends. Get your CPAP machine. It will change your life.
True story.
Big advocate over here.
It is really hard, I think, sometimes to, especially with illnesses like fibromyalgia, where our doctors sometimes don't know everything they really should know in order to be able to help us. We have to be our own advocates. And it's a really fine line sometimes between being the advocate you need to be and saying, but I need this medication, right?
And it's tricky because why shouldn't you be allowed to just say that, right? Like, maybe you should be allowed to just say that and have the doctor prescribe it. And it does depend on individuals. But I think, like I, for example, with all my health issues this year, I have one of my best friends was an ER nurse for 20 years. So she's telling me all this stuff. She's like, you got to get this. And we all, I think, have family members and friends who are like knowledgeable and helpful. And honestly, I think she probably saved my life by forcing me to go to the doctor this year. And also, I don't want to go to my doctor and say, well, my nurse friend said you have to do this, this, and this, right?
Right.
But I did say to my doctor, hey, my nurse friend talked about this. Should we do it? Like, should I have this test? Should I have that test? And I just was like, I don't know about it, but my nurse friend told me about it. And my doctor was fine with that. She was like, we shouldn't do that one because of this, but we should do this one because of the, she was totally willing to work with me. But I think if I had been so attached to one outcome, I didn't know that I had sleep apnea. I would never have thought of that. And so, like, if I had been attached to thinking I had a heart condition, I just would have been wrong,
Right. And not actually fixed the problem.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Not gotten the actual help that you need. I think there's got to be, I mean, they did go to medical school.
Yeah.
We did not, most of us.
Give that to them. I mean, as a lawyer, I kind of get it. I do have people sometimes come to me and say, I have $1 million lawsuit and here are the claims that I need to bring. And then I think, okay, go do it. Doesn't sound like you need help. But if you want a legal opinion, that's not how the law works at all. You're not going to be successful. But if you've decided ahead of time, but I think that we become a little bit resistant to other people's supports when we've had that be a negative or trapping or abusive experience. And it makes sense, right? When we've had bad experiences with doctors or we've had them break our trust, it's hard to go back to them and think that they're going to have the right answer, But I think if we use doctors as tools towards our health, they're just a tool that we use, and their knowledge and their training is that tool. Like, we can ask them questions, get all that information out of them. I think the same can be true with bosses and with employers. If they are a tool towards our success of expressing ourselves in the world, of offering our gifts to the world, then we don't use them as that trap. Lawyers are a tool. If you go to a lawyer, they are a knowledgeable tool that you can ask questions to, where they know certain frameworks and processes.
And in the midst of all of that, we are still the ones that know our bodies the best, right?
Yes.
And being able to hold both of those things. Yes, I'm the one that knows my body the best, but maybe there are other experts, other resources that know things I don't know.
And it's the same for me as a lawyer. Like, I always say, for some reason, people give a lot of credit to lawyers to the extent to where my clients sometimes think that I know what happened to them better than they do. And I'll say, like, I wasn't there. You were the expert about the facts of what happened. I'm never going to know that.
Right. Like to tell you a scenario and say, was this harassment, or tell you a scenario and say, was this discrimination?
Or, I mean, really, like, what they're asking, because there's no like firm line about that either. That's all what would a jury say, right? But really what they're coming to us to ask is it worth investing the enormous amount of money into filing a lawsuit based on this, because a jury might find in my favor? Is it worth reporting this because I might get an outcome that I want? How do I tailor my language to check the legal boxes to make sure I'm enforcing my rights? Those are the kind of questions that how should I say this in a way that will best enforce my rights? But ultimately, to me, I think that there's so much that we can do that really can use the legal framework, but kind of falls outside of the legal framework to make these situations less energy draining, more empowering for ourselves. And I think that's really the most important point.
Right. Those things that we can do before you get fired, right? Like you were saying, call us back when you get fired, all the things between now and then.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes. And before we quit, because most people that quit I'm a lawyer in Oregon, so I can't, obviously this is not intended as legal advice, and I can't give legal advice outside of Oregon. But in most places, if you quit, you lose most, if not all, of your legal rights. So you also wouldn't have a case then, not that anyone even really usually wants to have a case. You just want to have a job and do your work and be healthy.
Like not being able to file for unemployment. If you quit, you can't do that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Well, this has been super interesting talking with you through all of this. What are some resources for people who may want to dig into this a little bit more, either for themselves or for somebody else?
Yeah, they're always welcome to listen to my podcast. It's called the Empowered Communication Podcast. My co-host Megan and I have fun conversations and real life examples on there of work environments that we've seen and what we've seen overcome toxic workplace conflict. So they're always welcome to check that out. I'm at erisresolution.com. My business is called Eris Conflict Resolution. And so it's ERIS resolution.com. We have trainings on there. We specifically have a training about taking time off, because a lot of times that is an issue. How does that intersect with serious health conditions and disability rights and all of that? So it's that, again, doesn't give legal advice, but people are welcome to access that kind of, there's a sexual harassment training. There are a number of trainings on there that folks are welcome to access on their own, sort of in their own privacy, to understand how those rights exist. And we have a bunch of other resources, my books and everything, but yeah.
And they're all there at erisresolution.com?
They're all at erisresolution.com.
Awesome. Yeah. We will have links to all of that stuff in today's show notes, which is fibromyalgiapodcast.com/125. So we'll have all the links to your stuff and your book and everything else too.
Thank you. Yeah.
So just as we wrap up, for the patient out there who is, feeling maybe dismissed in the doctor's office, or is hearing those little comments behind them at work, or whatever they're experiencing, I would love for you to just talk to them for a sec.
I would just say those experiences can feel so isolating. It can feel so lonely to feel sick, to feel overwhelmed, to feel targeted, and to know it's unfair, but then to kind of doubt yourself, like maybe it is fair, and then to debate that. It can just feel really lonely. And I would say you are in a crowd of amazing people. I have worked with lawyers and chemists and judges and marketing professionals. I worked with a monk, HR representatives, CEOs who have had these experiences. You are in an amazing group of amazing people, and none of this is your fault, and none of this means that you did anything wrong or that you deserve bad treatment. I would say choose one support that works for you, and then choose a next support that works for you, whatever that is. Big problems are worth solving, and you've been called to solve a big problem, but you are not on your own in solving it. Whatever is the one next support for you, the one next thing that will help you get through this, is worth choosing. Sometimes you won't know that right away, so you have to make choices and choose the wrong support, and then try again and try again and try again. And that is part of the process. And so even if you have a doctor that didn't work out, who was a bad doctor, you try again with a new doctor. You try again with a new coach. You try again with a new therapist. Like, take this seriously, care for yourself. And this is a problem that's worth solving, and it's worth solving with support.
Couldn't have said it better. That's a great place to leave it. Thank you so much for being here, for sharing your expertise. And y'all, if you need any of this kind of help, please do reach out to Meredith. She's awesome. And that wraps up my interview with Meredith Holley, workplace conflict mediator, communication coach, attorney, and the founder of Eris Conflict Resolution. I also want to give you a few other episodes to check out if you'd like to go deeper on some of the topics Meredith and I touched upon. First, if you're looking for more advice on improving communication with your doctor, I want to recommend episode 113, Help Your Doctor Help You, with Dr. Ginevra. Episode 105, Talk to Your Doctor Effectively, with Dr. Andrea Chadwick. Or episode 6, The Patient's Role in Their Own Healthcare. If you're looking for more information on workplace accommodations and the laws surrounding working with a chronic health condition, things like the Family Medical Leave Act, workplace accommodations, all of that, I highly recommend episodes 14, 15, 42, and 93. These 4 episodes with Coach Julie Hamilton cover several aspects of working with a chronic illness, including her book, Chronic Illness at Work. And don't worry about trying to remember all those episode numbers. I know that was a lot. We are going to link to all of them in today's show notes. Just go to fibromyalgiapodcast.com/125 and you'll see all those episodes listed for you. And now I've got this week's listener shout out. This was a comment from Carrie Lynn, who shared this on Facebook. She says, I love these podcasts. Anyone else with fibromyalgia who needs some realistic tips and advice, I highly recommend giving this a listen. One last thing. We have our next live Fibromyalgia Stories of Hope and Healing event coming up on Saturday, January 20th. If you haven't attended one of these events yet, this is a free live virtual event where I interview our recent graduates about how they've been able to improve their fibromyalgia symptoms over the last few months. You may have heard excerpts of these events here on the podcast. We would love to have you join us for the full event. Graduates from our Certified Fibromyalgia Advisor program typically are able to reduce their fibromyalgia symptoms by about 50% during the 3-month class. During the live event on January 20th, I'll interview each graduate, share how much they were able to improve and exactly what they did to achieve that improvement. How would your life be different if you were able to cut your fibromyalgia symptoms and pain in half? It is absolutely possible to feel better. My coaches and I, we help people do exactly that every single day. For more information, and if you'd like to register to attend the free event, you can visit today's show notes at fibromyalgiapodcast.com/125 or go to ifcigraduation.com. And if you're interested, of course, in joining our next class, we are enrolling for that now. The link to learn more about our Certified Fibromyalgia Advisor and Certified Fibromyalgia Coach classes will be in today's show notes as well. You can also go to BAFibrocoach.com. See you back here next time.